Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for another Batman review. Today it is Season 1, Episode 26, Batman Sets the Pace, which is Part 2 of The Joker Trumps an Ace. So once again has guest star Cesar Romero as the Joker. And I have to say, this is an episode I could see some fans of the show really liking and others not really liking much at all. And unfortunately, I was in the second category. This episode just didn't work for me. I thought it was by far the worst episode of the show up to this point, and I'll explain why as we go. So we start with the cliffhanger where Batman and Robin are stuck in the chimney with the gas, and they actually go back to each other and kind of just climb up the wall, which was kind of an interesting way to get out of it. It was a little bit different than anything the show's done, and I didn't really have a problem with it, so that was fine. So then Batman and Robin put clues together back in the Batcave, as they always do, and they wind up at this, I think it's like a magic shop where the Joker's hideout is, and they're spying on him. And this scene's a little bit long, in my opinion, but this episode will have bigger problems later on, in my opinion. So we do see a scene where the Maharaja is sitting there with the Joker's men and Jill, but no Joker, which is kind of interesting. And I have to say, the Maharaja doesn't really seem that distressed either about being kidnapped, but we'll find out why later. So then after this scene, we get more analysis from Batman and Robin, and eventually they do break into the Joker's lair, and there's a big fight with confetti once again. And I have to say, this fight was pretty well done. It was one of the better fight scenes of the show so far, and it saved this episode a little bit for me. Unfortunately, everything that happens from this point forward in the episode, I didn't really care for at all. So the Batman apprehends some of Joker's men, but the Joker and Jill, the girl from the first episode, get away. Once again, she gets nothing to do other than feel bad for Batman, even though she's supposed to be working with the Joker. But at this point, something even more strange happens. The Joker gets away, and we'll see him again later on in the episode, but Jill just disappears. We hear no more from the character at all. I actually went back after I finished the episode to see if I missed something, but there's no more mention of her, so I guess she just gets away. Who knows? Now, even though her character isn't that important to this story, this does feel a little bit like lazy writing to me. You introduce a character and don't do anything with them. Basically, her character has no purpose other in this episode other than to just be a female character. But we continue on with the episode, and the Joker decides he wants a ransom, because that's what villains do on this show. He says he'll give the Maharaja back if Batman goes to the bank, I think it is. There's a phone conversation between the Joker and Batman and the Commissioner, which is a little bit strange and too long, in my opinion. But anyway, there's supposed to be a ransom, and Batman is supposed to be there to witness the check being signed. I believe it is. So that's basically what sets up the end of this episode. So Batman goes there, and the Maharaja's there, and he gives some strange speeches, which seemingly go on forever. I really didn't think they were that interesting. But eventually, Batman uses like this pin. I guess it's like some kind of bat pin, and he pokes the Maharaja with it, which is odd, which starts another fight scene. And I thought this fight scene was pretty poor. Probably my least favorite of the show so far. But ultimately, it leads to the Maharaja being unmasked as the Joker. And we find out that the Maharaja was never in town, that it was the Joker disguised as him the whole time, which may seem pretty clever on the surface, but when you think about it, it's pretty elaborate and probably a little bit too much of a stretch to believe this. I know that this show isn't always supposed to be about being realistic and having great plots, but this suspended my beliefs a little bit too far. It just didn't work for me. I thought it was kind of silly. And the fact that Joker would be able to pull this off for this long a time doesn't really make sense. And then we kind of find out that Batman knew about this because he made a phone call and he found out that the Maharaja was never supposed to be in Gotham to begin with. Wouldn't this be something you would have checked out a long time before that? I know they didn't have the technology then that they do now, but couldn't they have found out if he was supposed to be in town a lot sooner? This whole thing is just too much for me to believe. I also just don't think the ending of this episode was done that well. And what was the motivation for this anyway? Just for the Joker to have fun? Like, he was never going to get anything that great out of it. This whole plot really just didn't make that much sense to me. And the ending of this episode was kind of strange too, the last scene. I'll just leave it at that. So overall, I think Batman Sets the Pace is the worst episode so far. There were some amusing moments and one good fight scene, so I would give it a 2, but the fact that they just ignored a female character halfway through the episode is lazy writing, in my opinion, and that annoyed me as well, so I'm going to give this episode a 1.5. So a 1.5 for Batman Sets the Pace, and I do not recommend this episode, unless you have to watch every single episode. And as always, thank you very much for watching.